Okay, so technically this is kind of old news at this point, especially if you watch day one of the Summer Stage West Qualifier Shock matchup, but Striker's back on the Shock, and it's so ridiculous that I just feel a need to make a video about this. This isn't some ordinary event that's happening. It may seem kind of ordinary with how often it seems to happen these days, but just looking at it from like a retrospective, this might be one of the most absurd career paths that we have ever seen, and there is no way that it's ever going to be replicated. So for the third time in his career, Striker is now signed to both the Boston Uprising and the San Francisco Shock. And this marks the second time where he signs with both teams in the same season. There's three constants in this world: death, taxes, and Striker going to the Shock after he leaves Boston. You couldn't make this stuff up even if you tried. I mean, look at this Wikipedia page and tell me it is not the most ridiculous thing you have ever seen. In the span of 6 years, he has played for 2 franchises, 3 occasions each. And just to make things even more absurd, in the last 14 months alone, he has played for both of them twice. Him playing for Shock makes sense. Krusty is his guy. He's always going to want to play with him, but how he always manages to go to Boston first is what makes no sense to me. It's like he desperately wants to have a redemption arc with them just to realize it's not going to work out every single time. This last time, there definitely wasn't any sort of bad blood. It's just that on Boston in particular, he had no good use. He was just going to be on the bench anyway, so he might as well leave and try and pursue a different opportunity elsewhere. And it just so happens that Krusty loves this guy to death, and the Shock are in desperate need of some reinforcements to try and turn their season around, so might as well bring back their veteran and Krusty's favorite person ever yet again. The Striker signing, while hilarious, isn't exactly a groundbreaking pickup for the Shock. He's past his days of being a superstar player. He still can be really good, but he does have very specific uses. And even after watching him yesterday, I'm still not entirely sure to what extent Striker's use is going to be for San Francisco. It seems like he's going to be a rotational piece. He's not going to be in all the time. Even though he's on ping, they'd prefer probe for hard hit scan metas, and even a lot of the time on the Sombra. And to be fair, the Shock looked really good in that dive between Junbin, Proper, and Probe. It was good. But for Striker himself, it would seem that for some maps, he's going to be in there to play alongside Proper, with the whole goal being to put him in as big of a comfort zone as humanly possible. You can have Proper flex over to the Echo, as we saw, and then Striker can play the Tracer, and you won't see much of a fall off because of Striker's experience on that hero. And if necessary, if you'd prefer to have Proper on Tracer, you could put Striker on the Sombra as well. There's different choices you have with him. Dive is the best possible place to be having Striker in the rotation right now, so for the time being, in the current metagame, Striker will be useful in this type of triple DPS rotation. And even though the sample size is little, that's what we've gotten so far, which is great for both sides. It's just funny how it has to keep happening like this. Like, why bother going to Boston, bro? Just wait for the Shock to call you up. It seems like it's destiny at this point for it to happen every single year. Krusty always feels the need to have you on his team, so just chill. Wait for him to call you. Or how about you get a 2-way contract going, or like a clause where after a few months, you're allowed to go back there again. It's just so comical to witness Striker's career go into this ridiculous spiral. Almost in a way, it's like tarnished his legacy. I mean, not really, he's still one of the all-time greats, but just thinking about it recently, a lot of people don't remember him for his heroics and what he's done as a champion. We're just thinking about how he can't stop going between Boston and the Shock constantly like this. People likely will never view him in the same light anymore. It's hilarious, but also kind of sad at the same time. We'll see how this Striker experiment pans out as the rest of the season goes on. But before I end the video, I quickly wanted to pivot into the Shock's first game against LA Gladiators. If you missed it and you don't want to be totally spoiled about the outcome and what happened, you should click off the video now. But I wanted to discuss it because it has to do with Striker and just with how the Shock performed in general. It's still very early to tell. It's just one game. It's a small sample size, but they looked like a totally different beast. I was way off the mark. There were a lot of questions about if they could piece it all together, and if signing Western players was the right idea. It seemed questionable just given the path they were going down at the beginning of this year, but they're showing exactly why. They're making me shut my mouth right up, as Luke, Mino, and Renko have so far seemed like seamless fits. It seemed that the idea of Finn going to the bench wasn't all that far-fetched after all. Renko and Luke Mino just synergize better together, and they showed it. Despite Luke Mino having to flex over to the main support, he did a pretty decent job. Him and Renko both did. They were very stable, and the way that they played was just way different compared to Vindame and Finn. Way less aggressive, a lot more passive and patient, and that's what ultimately made the difference. The rest of the Shock players weren't having to constantly worry about their backline feeding and making ridiculous mistakes and overcommitting and getting punished for it. Luke Mino and Renko were a stable pillar. Those guys positioned themselves well, and even though they weren't constantly making ridiculous plays like some of these godlike backlines out there, what they were doing was enough. This seems to be the Shock's bread and butter. It doesn't matter what other players they have, what stars, Western players seem to be the glue that keeps them together. You know, your supers of the world, Kaluj, you think of those guys. Obviously, Renko and Luke Mino aren't household names like that, but if they fit the system, then they fit the system. And by playing well here at the start, it's only going to build their confidence. They weren't perfect, and they did play passively along with the rest of the Shock. They weren't super aggressive with a lot of their engagements, but this is how you have to start. You have to play safe and feel each other out. They made the correct decision by not getting too overly ambitious. And now after beating a team like Glad, and immediately finding success, that's going to give you that confidence to start to do those things more and to challenge these top teams. This is literally the exact start that the Shock supports needed, and it's the exact start that the rest of the Shock were looking for as well. It just puts everybody in a way better mindset. Obviously there was a tie-in there, but to 3-0 Gladiators like that is so great for them, and I'm so happy for that Shock backline to see them succeed, to see them build up their confidence and their skills. Luke Mino, after suffering on Vegas Eternal for like a year and a half, finally got his first win in the Overwatch League, and Renko, one of the most wholesome, positive people that we've seen in a rookie debut, smiles all around, already has his first win under his belt. You really can't draw up a better start for the quote-unquote white boys, as this community commonly likes to call the American players. This is really important for them to perform, as there's a lot on the line for the Shock to turn this season around with the enormous expectations they have, but also on Krusty's legacy in particular. Proper surely has a lot to prove still, as he wants to be one of the best ever, of course, and finally win that championship, but Krusty in particular has been under a lot of heat these last couple of years. People are starting to think that he's an overrated coach, especially with how this season started, so he needs to have an epic comeback and have all these new additions be extremely justified to show that he really does know what he's doing and that he still can be an elite coach. As for how the rest of the team performed, well, Probe and Striker I kind of already mentioned early in the video, but they're making for really, really solid complementary pieces for Proper. They're allowing for him to play more in his comfort zone, which is something that I guess he's saying really could not provide. And you saw the result firsthand. Proper looked like a man possessed. Junbin looked like a man possessed. Those guys looked completely rejuvenated. They were so much happier out there. They looked way more locked in and focused. That break, plus different teammates, did them a world of good. Proper looked more like his MVP self with all of the random kills he was getting on Tracer. He was carrying like every single map, and then Junbin was realizing his true potential as a tank player, being that wrecking ball player that we all know he could be, being good on the Winston as well. That is the most locked in I have ever seen him be, and it's definitely by far the best performance he has had since joining the Overwatch League. Junbin though, man, I mean, it was just such an inspirational performance out of this guy. The clutches on Winston to pop that primal in a 4v5 on Coliseo and doing the things he did on Ball, it was absolutely incredible. I can't get over the dives that him, Probe, and Proper had in those last couple of maps. They were just so cleanly executed. Probe was absolutely dominating. His timings were so good with the EMPs and hacking a target, and then you'd see Proper and Junbin there for the follow-up, killing the backline every single time. Gladiators were getting blown up before they could even start their plays. And in that respect, a lot of credit has to go over to Probe. He's played with these guys before, of course, but it still takes a while to rekindle that synergy. And even though he's on ping, you know, at like a really early time in Korea, he was still willing to be that in-game leader. He stepped up. He communicated when he was going on targets, and as a result, the dives looked as clean as they did. He was starting all of that. It was him. It didn't look like with Heesang. There was no indecisiveness. We'll see what happens as they play tougher opponents, but that's a promising sign if you're a San Francisco fan to see that kind of synergy right off the bat when these players still haven't played together that long yet. This is what starts it. Sometimes one win is all it takes. This seems like a desperation move at the start, but if you get a win going, What makes you not think that you can get another one, and another one after that? And then what makes you think that you can't punch up to some of these opponents you stood no chance against prior? One spark is all it takes, and for the rest of the league, that could be worrisome. We'll leave it at there though, I've rambled on long enough. That's what I think about this new striker signing, as well as how the Shock performed in their first game since making all these changes. I'm very intrigued, folks, and I hope you are as well. Let me know what you think about their performance from yesterday down in the comments below, as well as Striker joining the Shock for the third time. And if you want to stay up to date with all of the most recent Overwatch League news and storylines, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.